Have you ever walked past your air purifier and hear it suddenly kick on? That's what happened to me this week. The Midwest has been dealing with, and the East Coast, dealing with smokes from Canadian wildfires. And every time I walked across my living room, my purifier ramped up. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's a coincidence. And then it happened again and again and again. And I started wondering, is my floor somehow making my air worse when I walk across it? And it turns out, yes. Hi, everyone. Jill from the North Woods, where we talk about nature right outside our front door. Well, this week is a bit of an emergency episode because I had something else planned to talk about. But after we got all this smoke, I started having questions about nature outside and all this smoke that we're getting right now. I wanted to know more. And so I did some research about it. And there's a lot of good stories about how these smoke fires affect everything that's going on outside. So here's the thing about it is my floors are not dirty, but these tiny particles of smoke, leak into the house and they settle on every surface. Right now, every surface in my house is dusty. And every time you walk past it, it stirs it back up again. And my air purifier measures the air and then starts responding by turning on the fan. But this small observation led me to a much bigger question that I couldn't shake all week. Where does all this smoke actually go? And what happens to all the living things that are outside? So first of all, what is smoke? On a smoky day, the air just looks thick and solid. The horizon fades. The blue is gone. There's no orange in the morning light, but sunsets can turn dark orange and very creepy. Everything gets hazy. And I haven't seen the sky for a couple of days now. But eventually it rained and then it kind of cleared up for a while and suddenly I could see the blue sky at all. But the question is that wildfire smoke is made up of incredibly small particles, many times smaller than 2.5 microns. So it's very, very small. That's about 1/30th of the width of a human hair. And because it's so small, it can stay suspended in our atmosphere for days and weeks. The wind can carry it over hundreds or thousands of miles. The smoke that's happening over the North Woods started this week as trees were burning in Canada and also what they call the Boundary Waters, which is an amazing place, but it has a lot of ground clutter in it. And so a tree that's burning thousands of miles away, a few days later, particles are here and I'm breathing it in tiny pieces of it. Part of the actual question that people talk about is they said, well, why doesn't it smell like smoke? And the reason is that the smoke burns away a lot of what we would consider to be wood smoke, right? When we're at a campfire, that is gone. And what's left is a variety of different chemicals. So when actually you're in this smoke fire, it smells bad like chemicals instead of like wood fire. But then the question comes in, how does this air actually ever clear up? Nature has its own cleaning crew, and that's because some of the particles start to settle out because of gravity. Everything with a weight falls to the ground. It will stick to leaves, rooftops, my car is full with it, fences, and then eventually the wind disperses the smoke into cleaner air and dilutes it a little bit. So some of it goes into the ground and some of it goes elsewhere in the air. And the most effective cleaner is rain. Every raindrop is like a tiny vacuum cleaner on its way down, bumping into these smoke particles and hauling them to the ground. And it's what causes, if you've ever had a storm, there's a really kind of a weird fresh smell that happens. It's actually because the raindrops are hitting the ground. And it makes essentially the air much cleaner. So yesterday we had our smoke up in the 453, the air quality was 453. And then we had a very short-lived rain. And guess what? After the rain came through, the air went back down to somewhere in the 70s, which isn't great still, but it's better than 453. So the rain, no matter how short it was, brought all those particles down to the ground. But they don't disappear there. They become part of the world. Some mixes into the soil. Some of it washes into streams and lakes. Some of it becomes nutrition for the next generation of plants. That carbon that was locked inside the tree becomes smoke, crosses a continent, and settles into the ground somewhere else, eventually feeding something else. Nature doesn't waste anything. And so here's the part that I couldn't stop thinking about too. I'm inside. I work from home. I have this, retreat indoors. I have 3 air purifiers, 2 upstairs and 1 downstairs, doing its job to clean out the air. I have a pet bird downstairs, and I was thinking, oh no, what if my pet bird, because my air quality inside my house wasn't great until I got these purifiers all running all the time. What about my poor bird and his little tiny lungs? And then I thought, oh gosh, what about the poor birds outside that don't have little air purifiers cleaning it all out for them? So I started thinking about it. I walked to my window and just kind of, looked out. Couldn't see very much. But the animals outside don't have that option. The birds are particularly vulnerable to this because they're constantly breathing outdoor air. Birds' respiratory systems are incredibly efficient. They have air sacs that keep the oxygen moving through them differently than what mammal lungs do. And that efficiency is exactly why canaries were used in coal mines. Their body absorbed whatever was in the air faster and more completely than our bodies do. We may breathe it out and we might breathe it, or breathe it in and breathe it out again. And so that means that smoke is reaching us, and has us reaching for our inhaler if we have asthma, but it can hit bird systems a little bit harder. During these heavy smoke events, researchers have observed birds cutting down their migration flights to shorter times, changing their altitudes to avoid the worst parts of the particular layer, or grounding altogether until the conditions improve. A bird doesn't get to decide mid-migration whether a trip is worth it to go this week or next week, but stopping early means that finding food and shelter in an unfamiliar place, possibly one that's also smoky, can turn off its timing. Believe it or not, even though it's not very late in the year, as I'm talking about this, we're in mid-July, birds are already starting to pack up and migrate. So this can turn around their timing quite a bit. If they're trying to reach breeding grounds in South America by a certain time, they may be delayed. So it's not just birds, insects too, pollinators depend on, things. Those are also affected by the smoke itself. It dims the sunlight, which can disrupt the temperature. I remember they were saying earlier this week that the East Coast was going to get some really awful record highs because we're in El Nino right now, and so that means hot and dry. And because there was smoke cover in the sky, they ended up staying around 83 degrees. So the way the sunlight dimmed disrupted the temperature. The light cues that they depend on can change things. The way they reproduce is based on the light. Mammals can show stress responses during prolonged smoke exposure, and aquatic life isn't spared either. Ash and particulate that sets into the lakes and streams affects the chemistry. I think it makes it more acidic. And so it can affect those things too. So there's no indoor version of any of like a purifier that helps out, no sealed windows. They just wait it out. And I think the encouraging side of things, and I want to leave this as a huge downer in this, is fires have been a part of our world since our world existed. There were fires. We are now in a position where humankind can combat fires, which never used to happen. It used to just burn and burn and burn. There's a lot of different situations that happen where this can happen. And sometimes it's about smoke. Sometimes it's about dust from the Sahara Desert that crosses the Atlantic Ocean, reaches North America. It helps fertilize the rainforest thousands of miles away from the source. Pollen drifts across the country. Seeds ride on the wind. Birds migrate across continents. And even the water in the glass next to you might have evaporated from an ocean on the other side of the planet before it fell here as rain. So this is not something new. This is something that has always happened. It is part of nature itself. And animals and plants and insects and everything have survived this before. It is part of how the soil becomes nutriented. I'm making up a word now. But the atmosphere itself isn't an empty space over our head. It is a river up there. The wind is a river, and it never stops moving, carrying moisture, carrying pollen, seeds, ash, dust, insects, birds, scents, smoke, microscopic organisms around the planet every day. And so once you start thinking about that way, it shifts in us that when we step outside, we're not in our own little bubble. We're standing inside of one enormous connected system. And when there's a wildfire in Canada and a rainstorm in the North Woods and a bird riding an invisible current along during migration, it's all part of the same story. My air purifier switching on is just part of the story. And it just had me thinking about what exactly is happening. Sometimes the biggest lessons about nature, they don't start with a hike or a rare sighting, and sometimes they just start with a simple question. Hey, why did my air purifier just turn on? So the next time the sky looks hazy, take a moment to think, what is out there that's causing this to happen? Is it just a hazy day? Is it pollution from a local thing? Is it just smoke from a fire that's over a few states away or a different country away? Try to think about that. What does it take, for us to keep going while we're on the inside? But you also think about how the outside animals deal with it too, and they've been dealing with it forever. Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me today. You can find everything I do at jillfromthenorthwoods.com. My website is brand new. I just finished last night making it all fancy, so you can check it out. It has every podcast I do and every way to contact me. Until next time, keep observing and keep wondering and keep listening to the stories that nature is already telling.